Seinfeld suit idea with the sneakers. I just can't handle that stuff. Welcome, Red Morning. There's Carl. How's he doing? You guys know the deal. I guess, Carl, so you have no idea. These guys are in chat right now talking about T-Rexes and giraffes. And do you have any idea what that means?
Yeah, that's the slightly autistic Discord you guys have been doing on the side.
Well, the giraffe is technically from Twitter. Because everybody was talking, the alpha male is like the lion of the blah, blah, blah. And then finally Rob had the great idea. Is like, who can totally mess up a lion? A giraffe. And then they were just sharing memes of giraffes running over lions for like the day and a half. And now it's kind of like it's like the above alpha. You're the giraffe now.
Yeah, next one should be like doing a female version of that with like the hippo running down the lion and crushing the lion.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that'll be good because the only hippo meme they got so far is the one where it was eating a watermelon, which is crazy. That's some jaw strength, but whatever.
Yeah, slightly racist too.
All right. So, topic today, Carl and I were kind of talking about it, and it was about naturals, not naturals, that sort of thing. So, the first question I got, Carl, so I need you to school me because I think philosophy's for nerds, and you were like, yeah, but I still read it. When you said Kantian, I'll tell you how I understand Kant, and then you tell me, or Kant, and then you tell me why that's a retarded take on it. Where the idea for Kant was being able to critique something from within its system. Is that like how I understand it, right, or no?
Yeah, roughly.
All right.
Essentially, he wrote the two books I'm leaning on here because I'm not going into like his moral philosophy is the critique of practical reason versus the critique of pure reason, and that was essentially empiricism versus rationalism. And it's kind of wrong the way I used it. The reason I used it was that the thing I wanted to get into are the combination of people who have theoretical knowledge, people who have practical knowledge, and then see like how do you need to integrate them? Can one function without the other, and so on.
Oh, okay.
Because we've all heard about the natural, right? The guy who's just naturally good with women who always gives the worst fucking advice on how to pick up chicks.
AJ, I've heard of this archetype before. Yeah.
And kind of the reason behind that isn't so much that they lack theory, it's that they lack the ability to distinguish what made them successful in the first place.
Oh.
So they can tell you how to do something, but it's just going to be, yeah, well, you have to do what I did, except like I have better genes than you, I'm a foot taller, and I just really lucked out in the face department.
So it's basically no different than a guy giving you financial advice when his only investment history is in a bear market, right? Or bull market, the good one.
Yeah, or like the guy who inherited like 700 million from his dad, and then tries to give you financial advice.
Dude, there's apparently a ton of those on like entrepreneurship Twitter. The Fort St. Worth Playboy, he always talks about them. I guess he's like surrounded by entrepreneurs and stuff like that, and he hears about other great projects. And he's the kind of guy, he like opened a gym and shit like that, and he had to sleep in his gym to like make ends meet and mortgage his house and stuff. So when he hears about all these guys starting new projects, he's like, I just start asking, what's your wife doing? It turns out like my store is ramen ready and I'm working my ass off to get it, IPO. And it's like, oh, by the way, my wife is a surgeon. He's like, oh, so that $300,000 a year startup capital that you're just not counting in your bootstrap story. Those kind of make me laugh now when I see them.
Yeah, but it's kind of the like Richard Branson had like an old joke, how to become a millionaire running an airline.
Ooh, I've heard that. Be a billionaire, buy an airline.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not that all their advice is wrong, it's just that they are unable to conceptualize it outside of their own person.
Yeah.
And then you have the theoreticians that kind of annoy me even more, because that was kind of the upstream Twitter of things.
Speaking of which...
Or like actually, the guys...
Before you get started on that, Carl, could you explain to these guys what upstream Twitter is? Because a lot of these guys are probably not... It's like 2 years old now.
Oh, yeah. Like, upstream Twitter was this startup thing that got hyped. It was going to change the manosphere forever. It was going to prove the rational male was irrelevant and so on. And for, like, we had, like, 3-4 months of hype and constant, like, trying to get attention by attacking people. And then it just fizzled out without any content being produced.
Mm-hmm.
And
Actually, there
then
was
we ended
one.
up with, the Capitol being stormed and shit.
Oh yeah. Well, there was one piece of content. I remember this. I think it was. I can't remember who did the. It might have even been you. It was the one of those Baroque paintings of like the death of Caesar, and it had like Pat Stedman and all these other guys to it. And I think it was Mark Baxter was playing the part of Brutus in that one, and Rollo was the part of Caesar. And he's like, "Et tu, Baxter?" I don't know why, but that one out of all of it made me laugh.
Yeah, that one I like that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then we had like so it kind of got me thinking in that, let's say you're trying to make any kind of decision, like who would you want advice from? You obviously want to hear what like the people who do the research and the theory are doing, because they're coming up with, in ideally speaking, information that is contextualized. Like if you have a case study of a specific company, you know that whatever they found is only applicable to that company. It may be true for other companies, or it may not be, but you don't know.
Yeah. And if it is, it's kind
And
of
they-
an accident or happenstance. It's not like it was actually a thing they found.
Yeah, and over time you can kind of refine that. You can do more case studies and more companies, and you can reach a certain level of research where you can say, yeah, this is a general thing. And then you have things like Statistics Canada, or the
Don't get me started, man. I'm gonna get my anti-pro Canada rant on that shit.
yeah, but like anyway, like most of Canada and most European states have very, very good statistics on their population, because this is tracked straight out of all the public registries, so it's the gold standard. If you
Yep.
want to know how tall the average man in any like Western nation is, you can go into that stat and find it. But
That's Canada. And if the way they told us here was that Canada was considered like the world standard for statistics. I don't know if that's true, because it could have been just them fluffing us. At least until Harper. I know one year it was like a 2-year period where he shut down Stats Canada, and the problem is now is that every data set that goes through that 2-year period is just messed. So it's kind of
Yeah,
like
and-
broken now for a generation.
yeah, and so anyway, the point being that what you have with like Statistics Canada is you have wholly generalizable information in that you can apply that to the Canadian population and to population groups, and it's going to be accurate.
Yeah. Accurate enough.
Yeah, well, you're not going to find that, every guy in Canada is 5'10", but you're going to find that if you took every guy, it's 5'10".
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So, and those two are kind of outer points of empirical data. One is only applicable to one entity, one is applicable to all entities within that selection.
Okay.
And then you get, let's call it the qualitative research, which kind of goes into...
I could just
You can't-
feel the disdain wafting off of you.
Well, I don't disdain it. I think that's wrong. I just don't think it's useful to generalize to any population or group. It's a study of a phenomena within a given context, and that's all it is. You
Yeah.
can expand on it, make it bigger, make it smaller, but you're never going to be able to use it as like a equals X type calculation.
No. I don't know if that was ever the point, though. It's always kind of a...
No, it's
It was
not.
more so just like heuristics with a little bit of data behind it, was it not?
It's more about being able to study a specific phenomena without having to tie it into numbers.
Fair enough.
So, let's say if you take the Statistics Canada number and you come out to the fact that, okay, the average height of a Canadian male is 5'10", you're still not able to say why that's the average height. Or if
Oh, I
that
see what you're
changes and then 2 years down the line the average Canadian male is 5'8", you're not going to be able to explain that change. And that's where the qualitative research comes in.
I'm starting to think I do disdain it then, because if we want to bring this back to the sphere, that's that stupid Swiss watchmaker Manosphere character. The guy who's like, you spread any like red pill thing, right? AWOLT, or just so you know, if a girl falls out of love with you, you tend to notice, like any heuristic you want to use. And then some guy always has to figure out like, why does she think that way? And why? And I hate that, because It seems like the guy has a very easy choice in front of him. But instead of actually just making the hard decision, he'd rather like dissect his girlfriend or his relationship to find out why she treated him like shit, instead of just stop getting treated like shit. Yeah, I don't
Well, I
like
think
Paul.
knowing the why is useful, but you can. I would say that you can never know the why conclusively. You can have it within like an overweight of probability. Like you can have like a 51% chance that it was this or this set of variables. But whenever you're trying to deconstruct a social phenomena, you're always going to come into the multivariate problem that you have a lot of variables that you're not accounting for in your research.
I find the one that's more difficult though is the unfalsifiability. Fuck, that's a bad word. You can't falsify half that stuff. And
No,
that's
you
why
can't.
and that's like most of the arguments I found that was like soccer moms arguing about red pill is that they weren't falsifiable statements. You can't know that. You got the reasoning wrong. And that's why I've kind of since realized that red pill is more of a consequentialist idea. And I, of course, I can't say fancy words like that. So I just say, if I tell a guy the moon's made out of cheese and he goes to work out, then I don't care. The moon's made of cheese as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
Which
that's kind of a pragmatic tool use type approach that I agree with. But I'd say the major risk with that approach is that other people start telling him that other planets are made of other things, and that's why he should take cold showers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Whisper had a good answer to that too with his. I don't know if you ever read it. He had an article about putting this bucket on your head right now. Do you know the one or no?
No.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so it was a simple article. It came out around the same time that the lube oil guy was like screwing over the subreddit and pissing everybody off. But he's saying all these people are going to come and tell you to put their bucket on your head right now. It's like, follow my system or do what I want you to do, right? And he goes, sometimes it's easy. Like if somebody says to do X and you can mathematically calculate if X is a good idea, that's simple. But what do you do when you don't know how something's going to work? And he's referring to like how you live your life. Just live the trad life. And you're like, I don't have 50 years to test this out for myself. So how am I going to know if it works? And what he said is just look at the person giving you the bucket. And it's weird because that's Rich's little catchphrase, right? Like, would you want to trade places with that guy? But it's got some merit. So in this case, you're right. If everybody starts telling you to everything else is made out of cheese, well, you just kind of start looking at who's telling you. Because either they've lived the life and then they're the outcome of that life, or they're guessing, in which case you kind of know you should probably disregard it. I mean, that could apply to us too, I suppose. Somebody sees me and I'm not 7 foot tall Chad because apparently the red pill doesn't increase your height. Who'd have thought?
Would have thought they would add like 7 inches to your dick and your height.
Well, that's
That
because
would be
that's
like
the
the ultimate
marketing.
red pill.
It's got to be sevens.
But my thinking behind it was just that, okay, you can get good information out of theory. You can get good information out of a guy's personal anecdotes. But how do you decide which is which?
Ah,
And in that case, my kind of go-to is always to look at the results, right?
yeah.
What are the consequences of putting this into action? And sometimes you won't be able to because you just won't know. Like, the guy's never put it into action. Like, remember back in the day on, like, the pickup boards, you used to have, like, these long, convoluted routines that no one was ever able to test out because no one could get through them?
Oh, the old mental masturbation. Yeah, that was like a...
Well, for all we know, they could be perfect routines if you were able to execute them. It's just that they couldn't be executed, and therefore they are by default bad routines.
Yeah. But I mean, you can... That's a perfect case. Like, a lot of people are talking about that with COVID. You know how the argument is, well, if everybody had worn masks and nobody would have broken the rules, it would have been fine. Or if everybody got vaccinated and there was no rules, everything would have been fine. And everybody treats it all, it's like it's some kind of human failing, and I'd argue it's like the opposite. If that policy is so hard to implement that nobody can, perfectly can't be followed, then it's not a good policy. Which I think, is that where you're going with this too?
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing I've said with communism. Like, from a theoretical perspective, it's perfect. But from a practical perspective, no one's ever been able to implement it. So at that point, what's the sensible approach? Is it to keep harping on the same idea that no one's ever been able to implement? Or is it to adapt the idea so you can keep some of the good stuff in it while still making it implementable.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what you have to look for, at least for me, it's incremental improvements. You will never find like a perfect solution, but you can make things incrementally better. If you're 700 pounds today and you eat a McDonald's less and you're 690 tomorrow, yeah, you're still fat as fuck, but it's still better to be 697 than to be 700 pounds, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's that compounding idea, that compounding interest idea. A lot of guys miss out on that because they're so. And it's so weird when I can tie in those like pithy manosphere sayings that guys use to sell Gumroad courses and actually have them make sense, but where everybody's saying just try to be your best, like just be better a little bit every day. Like, what else are you gonna do? Plus, I found, at least for me, like if you're that 700-pound guy, tomorrow you're 690, then you're 650. Like at some point you reach that threshold where it's not just losing 10 pounds a week. Now it's losing 10 pounds a week and getting a girl. Now it's 10 pounds a week and getting a girl and getting a job offer. You know what I mean? Yeah. Once the guy hits to like 200 pounds, all of a sudden everybody's treating him nicer. And even though he's still doing the same work to lose 10 pounds a week, it's having like incrementally higher rewards.
Yeah, and that hits until a point where like there are less and less rewards, where you hit that diminishing return point.
Ooh, this is the fun one. I like this one.
And that was kind of my argument with like the Gym 10 laundry sphere we had back during that convention that shall not be mentioned, where, you know, just get 10% body fat, just get this much income, just get this much so-and-so.
Just be a millionaire, bro.
Yeah, and like in the end, your goal is to get good enough that you can live the life you want. And adding, let's take working out because it's the perfect example. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to get a lot of nice progress for like your first probably year or maybe 2 years doing something simple like starting strength or strong lifts 5x5 and, you know, just cleaning the chips out of your diet, just maybe having pizza once a week instead of once a day, those type, maybe drinking 10 beers instead of 14 twice a week and so on. You're going to get a lot of nice progress off that. But sooner or later, that stops. And then you're going to have to do something more. Maybe you have to go back to drinking 8 beers instead of 12. Maybe you have to eat like 2 pizzas less and switch those with salads. And then you get some more progress. But at some point, that progress is going to become so costly that to maintain the progress is going to hamper other aspects of your life.
Yeah, well, like you said, you can't be social anymore because you have to have, every time you leave the house, you need to have 3 freezer bags full of steamed chicken breast and broccoli. And at that point, nobody wants to hang around you because you smell like kale.
Yeah, or be the guy that pops open like a thermos with boiled eggs during lunch. Like, no one wants to sit next to that dude.
And it's funny because there's a lot of like, I don't know, it's an OCD thing or an ADD thing or an autism thing, but a lot of guys just get like fixated on it. And here's the other part that gets me too. So you get those initial dopamine rewards. Like we use pickup as an example. Guy picks up girl. Oh my God, this is great. Goes to pick up a girl again. This is great. And then, like you said, he gets that diminishing returns where he's out 7 days a week, running day game, 8 hours a day, and he's only able to pick up like X amount of people per week. Whatever the number is. I would never spend my entire day picking up chicks, so I don't know. Let's say it's 10. 10 girls a week, it's the max he can do. Unless he does like a 24/7 marathon. He turns his life into the new RSD online, starts selling Gumroad courses, doing all that shit. And you're right. It's not even so much that he has to sacrifice the other things in his life. It's that it's an addiction at this point, you know? And because he's used to be, if I put in an hour of work, I'd get 1 lay. And now he's at the point, if I put 10 hours of work, I only get 6 lays. So so he keeps putting in more and investing more because he wants to get back to that 1 hour to 1 lay kind of threshold, you know? And I think that's unhealthy because then you get guys that have that, if they have any addictive personality, that's when they start getting addicted to dumb shit like this. And that's where, what are the good example of that? Another good example, and I'll stop here, is the bodybuilders that turn to that weird bodybuilding style of anorexia.
Yeah, Megarexia.
That's the one. Yeah, Megarexia, which is an awesome name, by the way, as far as disorders go.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I'm kind of obsessive myself and use a lot of time on things that aren't necessarily in my best interest, but at the same time, it's a conscious choice to spend the amount of time on them
Mm-hmm.
that I do.
Yeah, for you, because you're smart about
And
it. A lot of people aren't.
but
I think that's the issue.
no, but I've kind of fallen into that same trap myself, where you just kind of you're so obsessed with a given goal that you've set.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm prone to falling into this during cutting. That let's say I'll set my goal for 200, and then I'll get to let's say 205, and it's like okay, I probably shouldn't drop any more weight now, but I set the goal at 200, so I'm going to hit 200 just to hit 200. Or like the moving goalposts thing, where it becomes like back when I dropped all the way down to 165, which I'm probably never going to do again.
I was gonna say.
But that was just like, it got to a point where I was constantly moving goalposts because it was 200, then it was 195, then it was 190, then it was 180. And it just kind of slipping on. And in the end, when I caught myself like doing anorexia light behaviors, that's when I kind of figured, okay, you know what? This kind of has to stop.
So what's it
Like
that
when you
catch,
go-
that you, what it caught you? Like, what was the trigger point where you realized?
Well, I brought a food scale to a cookout at Grandma's. At that point, I was like, okay, this has just gone way too fucking far.
Dude, that's funny. No, I mean, like, not that part's funny, but like I've experienced that a bunch too. Like when I was 17 and I first started working out, that was literally why I started going to the gym. I was just sitting there one day doing whatever around the house. I think I was 17, and I just looked over at the mirror and I'm like, fuck that, I'm going to the gym. And then been working out ever since, other than this 15-month break that we had. Back on strong lifts, by the way. Yeehaw.
Yeah, me too. But it's kind of like I have a friend of mine, and he's kind of funny that way because like he tricks himself.
Oh. How so?
Because he's like, I'm just going to go to the gym, and he lifts really heavy. So he'll have a workout, and he'll do like 9 reps. His entire workout is 9 reps.
Like one set, 9 reps, he's done?
No, like 3 sets, 3 reps.
Oh, okay.
Like he'll be like, okay, I'm going to go deadlift, and he's pulling enough now where he's like, well, after I've done those 9 reps, I'm fucked.
Dude, I'm surprised he hasn't snapped by then with that kind of keeping
But
that as a
then,
consistent
like,
thing.
but what I meant, by him tricking himself, he's like, he'll go in and he's like, okay, I'm just going in today. I'm going to have tomorrow off the gym, so I better go hard today. And he'll go hard. Then the next day, he'll be like, yep, time to go squat. And he'll go and he'll do 9 reps of squats.
Oh.
And then he'll be like, yeah, I have to go hard. I'm not squatting until next week. And he'll do his 9 reps, and he'll go home and he'll eat, he'll sleep. And next day, he'll be like, well, I'm supposed to have the day off. I'll just go in and do a little bit of bench pressing. And he'll go in and do a 3x3 bench, and he'll go back in. And so he just works out like twice a day, 6 days a week.
So I get, that's clever. I've actually seen clearance divers. That's like our Canadian, like, special diving EOD teams and shit. One of the guys, his name was John. And I remember he was dating a friend of ours, and they were talking about that. So when he was going for his first clearance diver prelim, he was training really hard to get to it, and it's like brutal. But I guess he filled his fridge with beer, just beer and liquor and snacks. And for some reason, and his thought on that was just like, I'm doing this to like get that oomph. I'm denying myself. I'm not drinking, and he's going to be exposing himself to it everywhere just so he could pretend he wasn't drinking. His girlfriend thought it was ridiculous, but I'm surprised. Like, a lot of guys like the idea of tricking themselves. I don't know. And it reminds me of guys who they get hooked on the anger phase. I don't know if you've heard about this. Guys get angry, they come to the red pill, they here's how you can do some shit to sort out women, sort out relationship, whatever, and then they solve it. And now they're not angry anymore, and they stop doing shit. So what they do is they sabotage their life in some way, set it up for failure, so when something fails, they can get angry again, so they can get that forward momentum and progress. And it's like this weird cycle of sabotage, anger, progress. And I wonder if those are kind of like the same thing as what you're talking about.
Well, I kind of get the anger phase, though, because, like, anger is one fucking hell of a motivator.
Yeah.
I could kind of see a guy who's fucked up his life, getting out of a divorce and starting with, like, okay, I need to get back in shape. And then, like, that fucking bitch, I'm going to fix my taxes.
You've been talking to Aaron Clary, I see.
Well, I've kind of noticed, like, with myself, that getting angry about things is a very good way of getting progress, because I find, like, complacency is easy when you have, like, most of the things you want.
Yeah.
Like, if you're already making more money than you can spend, it's very easy to kind of slack off a little bit of work.
And that's always the argument too. Like, did I earn this luxury time, which I'm a huge fan of? But then some guys are like, well, that's not good enough, and they kind of obsess about it. I don't know where the right path is on this either. Although I don't think there is a right path. I really think, and this is kind of the point that I have an issue with that, like that anger feedback cycle, or like the tricking yourself thing. It's because it's kind of letting life just happen as opposed to living life. Like, if it was a deliberate choice, that's one thing. But then trying to trick yourself is kind of the same as like, let the woman run things, and then if things go bad, I'll get angry and fix it.
I think there are different versions of tricking yourself, though. I think there's a productive way, which is where you're like, okay, you know what? I'm feeling like shit today. I'm just going to go into the gym and do 30 minutes of cardio. And then you get to the gym and you're like, well, I'm here anyway. I may as well do a set of squats. And then you're like, okay, that was an easy set. I'll just do another one. And then before you know it, you've done a workout. Because I find a lot of the time, even when I have, like, obviously my workout habit is shot after like a year and a half of the gyms being closed. Like, no one has a workout habit anymore.
Oh, not just that. My ego. If I had an ego, man, I'd be crying right now with the weight I'm pulling. All right, let's start with the bar. Oh.
So, like, because when it's a habit to go work out, you kind of feel, at least I get antsy if I don't go.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
But when it's not a habit, I have to kind of trick myself into making the effort, because, like, it's always more fun to play a game or watch some TV or do something else.
Sometimes it's even fun just to sit there and get ready to go to the gym. I found, like, that was my biggest problem in my 20s when I was working out, was that I would want to go work out, but before I work out, I got to make sure I eat first. Oh, now I got to sit there and wait 20 minutes. Well, I got to get my gear ready. Oh, I got to wash this. And then I realize I've killed 3 hours just getting ready for the gym. It was like probably the best procrastination method I had to kill, because it was so damn effective.
Yeah, speaking of, like, Dante's, like, who knew 20 kilos would be so heavy? Like, I remember I tried, like, some body weight squat thing at one point.
Yeah.
Where you're supposed to do 40 body weight squats. Mm-hmm. But you weren't allowed to do them, like, quick. You had to, like, use 3 seconds down.
Okay.
Stay there for 5 seconds, then 3 seconds back up. And at that point, I was like, I could do, like, 5 or 6 of those, and my legs were on fire.
Yeah, the time under tension stuff. Dude, it kills everything. Like, I haven't done an exercise ever with that. I think it was Drew Bay got me on those, like the 60 second. Because workouts are, 60 to 90 seconds a set anyway? He goes, well, then just do 1 rep every 30 seconds. So you can have 3 reps and get the same burn as some guy doing a full thing. And I'm like, fuck you, I'm going to die. Fuck you, Drew Bay.
Yeah, but, like, at one point, too, I think it was T-Nation had, like, the 40 squat challenge.
Oh, yeah. I remember
where you start off with, like, your body weight on the bar, like 1 times body weight, and you do as many reps as you can with that, and then you take off, like, 10%, and you just keep doing that until you've hit, like, 40 squats. That shit is brutal.
Yeah, what do they call that? Like a decline pyramid or something like that, or a deloading rep or something.
It's drop sets.
Drop sets, thank you, that's the one. Yeah, dude, I hated those. I hated those so much, because at the end, I mean, first off with squats, I would basically fucking snap myself. Squats and me have never fucking agreed, but anything, even benches. Like, I would never make the full 40. It'd always be like 35, and I'm just doing the bar by itself, or just trying to lift my arms in the right motion, and it never worked for me.
Yeah,
clearly,
but it's good, though,
ATP
because, like,
is more important than you give it credit for.
Yeah, but it also goes back to, like, what Stan Efferding was saying when he was training with Flex Wheeler.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't do cardio. They would do, like, 3 sets of 20 with squats or something. So they'd get their burn in, but they'd do it lifting weights.
Yeah. Which
and that actually makes sense to me. And that actually makes sense to me, to do, like, high rep weightlifting with low weights. Mm-hmm. To burn fat instead of, like, running or walking. Like, I like walking, obviously, because it doesn't trigger any kind of need for a recovery. Unless you go, like, hiking and shit.
Right.
But at the same time, you're kind of conditioning your body for a different activity when you're walking versus weightlifting.
Well, and there's the efficiency argument too, right? As you get more efficient in something, you'll burn less energy doing it, so you have to do more of it.
But like my argument with walking was always like, if even if you've been to the gym and you've lifted weights that day, you can still walk for like an hour or two without hurting your weightlifting progress.
Yeah, true.
You can't go like do a weightlifting and then go on a hard ass fucking bike ride for 47 miles without triggering its own need for recovery.
Swimming is the other one I liked for that. Because once you, like, if you're decent at swimming, I find it doesn't matter how tired I was at the gym, I can still at least get a breaststroke and do a couple laps without killing myself.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think part of that
Yeah.
too is to, like, you got to be good at it, because I'm very inefficient at like front crawl. So if I do that, I have to be like peak rest, or I just sink. My legs are like
but it's just-
heavy as shit and they sink anyway, so it's hard enough to stay afloat.
Well, it's like that dude just said in that comment there with the front squat. Like, I'd love to be able to do front squats. I've just never been able to do them comfortably.
Oh, really? See, that's funny because I'm the other way. It's the back squats. Even like a high bar back squat, I cannot do that with any weight whatsoever. And a low bar back squat, as soon as I add like anything higher than 2 plates, and I know it's just a one wrong movement, I'll probably do something stupid and injure myself. So I've kind of learned to love front squats. And Ed Lattimore got me on pistol squats, which I realized, like, that's awesome. I can carry one of those pink weights and still want to die. I can live with that.
No, I just found that like the high back squat has just always been my go-to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, somebody here is just like, use a pad. It's not that it hurts the back, like the part that the bar is sitting on. It's that for some reason I injured my lower back when I was like 24, and ever since then, like 3 plates is Snap City for me. It just is. And so I just stopped squatting heavy. It's just
Also,
an injury.
using the pussy pad. Friends don't like friends use the pussy pad, man.
I find it changes. It's weird. It changes the angle of everything, and it throws it off, and you have to kind of lean differently to compensate. And I just didn't find it helped.
I just found that, okay, when you, like I noticed it now when I started up squatting that my back muscles aren't conditioned to have the bar over them. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be like 2-3 weeks of, a big red line over my back, and then my back is conditioned for it. Same thing as, like, if I were to go and try and do, like, one of my old row workouts where essentially every motion is a pulling motion and most of them involve rowing, my hands would be minced meat because I don't have the calluses anymore to handle the bar for that long.
Yeah, I know. For me, it's similar. I find my favorite for just like a normal back squat is I tighten my grip right in, and I find if I get it just nestled right, like the ability of my hands to, like, they don't go back too far, and the back pushing it back, it kind of makes a nice little wedge, so it takes a lot of the weight off of just the skin. It's almost like just pinching it. But I mean, whatever. This is just like some weird.
I think you have a much narrower grip than I do because I have a fairly wide bar grip.
Oh yeah, I pull it right in tight. Because I ideally I want it so my hands are kind of pushing the bar up enough so I don't feel all of the weight on my traps. So that way it doesn't give me that giant red bar thing there. But at the same time, it's also because I really need to stretch my arms more, and so I find it helps with that range of motion.
Yeah, like I had an old workout buddy of mine ask me if I was doing squats or splits. My stance is that wide.
All right. Yeah, a lot of guys are offering me advice on this. Guys, look, for a decade now, I've seen physiotherapists. I've seen physiotherapists that train rugby teams. I've seen chiropractors. I've seen doctors. I've seen everybody. It's just everybody has a theory, and none of the theories have worked. Instead of obsessing over it, I just realized maybe having that guy with 1,000-pound squat is just not in my future, and I'm okay with that. Again, working out for me is just a means to an end. It's not an end in itself.
Well, it's the same kind of discussion I've had with bench pressing because, like, since I popped my shoulder out like 3 times now, I'm just not able to. Well, I'm able to do barbell bench pressing,
right?
But I just prefer to go with dumbbells, even though it's less weight, because A, it kind of deals with muscle imbalances, and B, your load is not that heavy, and C, it's safer if you're working out alone.
Oh yeah, dude. That's like the greatest thing ever when I found that out. Like, instead of using the barbell, use the dumbbells for most things. Just because, like, if you're getting the same tension for your muscles with less weight, then that's less chance of you hurting yourself.
It's also the same thing with like overhead pressing because I've seen a lot of guys get into questionable, not to go full like Jeff Cavalier here, but like I've seen a lot of guys get into unfortunate shoulder impingements when they do overhead pressing with a barbell.
Oh, yeah.
So like I tend to use the barbell for military presses, but I think a lot of guys would be better off just doing dumbbells.
No, I 100% agree. Because, like, you need less
Because
weight because your body's trying to stabilize it, too, so... Plus, I think that's the problem. It's that with the barbell, it stabilizes itself on the, whatever this plane is called. So then those muscles don't have to work on stabilization. And then when you get something that's too heavy, those muscles aren't there to help you prevent an injury. I think that's how the injuries happen.
Yeah, and I also think it has to do with, like, if you're... Like, I spent a lot of time correcting my deadlift stance because I taught myself how to deadlift. Mm-hmm. As a consequence, I had a couple of small issues that they're not a big deal if you're used to them and if you've kind of worked yourself up to lifting that way. But when I actually corrected my stance, I started getting injured because my body wasn't trained to handle those weights with the correct stance.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Where it's the muscles that surround it to hopefully stabilize it aren't used to working like that. So the primary movers tend to compensate for it, and then that's the injury.
Yeah, especially with anything that I would say is, I haven't noticed like big differentials in strength between the legs as much as I have usually arms with people. And using dumbbells will kind of help you get your weak side up to speed with your strong side.
Yep, 100%.
So like if you're right-handed, your dominant hand or your dominant side of your upper body is always going to be stronger than the other one because that's where you end up carrying most heavy shit.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm gonna take a quick break on this one after your thing here. We're gonna get that super chat out of the way. It's been nagging at me. What are we at here? 37 minutes. Super chat. So Carl Marlin, thank you. I bought a massage therapy hook cane thingy. Oh, it must be its medical name, and it's been helping with my back and hip injury. Highly recommended. Also magnesium supplements. I've heard good things about magnesium, potassium too. For me, I find swimming helps with the soreness. But that hook cane, is he talking about, I think I've seen it, it's like a J-hook, and it's essentially just like foam roller, but it's a hook. Do you know what he's talking about?
Enough. No.
All right. Yeah, I've heard good things about it. It's all essentially
but
massaging
foam rollers
stuff.
are great.
Yeah. And then I got to get to this one because why wouldn't I? Hector, Fuccfiles is absolutely great. I'm on that part where your student wife ran through a single mom who was your ex. Well, she wasn't just my ex. The problem was she was the ex of like 5 guys that were working in the fleet school at the time, and so we were all swapping stories, and then he sat there sheepishly. He's like, yeah, that's my wife. Very embarrassing, by the way. Totally screwed up like teacher discretion. But yeah, that was Melissa. Fuck that bitch. I hate her. I still hate her to this day. I even know her kid's name. Her kid's name is Kyla. And the fact that I know that now is just weird. It's been like a decade.
Why do you know that?
I remember why. Because I didn't know she was a single mom when we first dated until at one point her mom came with the kid over, and I'm like, oh, who's this? I'm like, oh, it's my daughter. And then the name there. And I remember the mom fucking hated me, which was weird. And then after the breakup, I remember going to get a haircut, and the kid was sitting there beside me. But the mom didn't recognize me, so I just said hey to the kid, used her name, and then the mom just looked over with like oh, who's my daughter hornet with it now? And it was just one of those stories that made me laugh. It never made the books. There's a little amendment for you guys.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious though, like how are the Daenerys going to end up being slutty in their future?
The Daenerys?
Yeah, you know the Game of Thrones, right?
Oh.
Like all the girls that were named after Daenerys Targaryen, how many of those are going to end up being sluts?
Oh,
I'm always
dude,
curious with new names. Because, like, you know, your Jessicas, your Candys, your Bambis, etc. You know they're going to end up as strippers.
That's a question. Are the Daenerys? Here's my question, though. What I'm curious about is the ghettoized version of that. Daenerys. Like, how are they going to fuck up the spelling to make it sound more ratchet?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Good question.
Okay, and here's the one. Yeah, so Carl, thanks again. $5 super chat. Just do Google Theracane or Muscle Hook. That's what I'm referring to. Okay.
All right, good. Thank you.
That's good because I got one of those, a foam roller, and I got the one that's got the spikes on it. Okay, yeah, this is what I was thinking of. I always thought they were called J-hooks. So it's just like a cane that has like a 180-degree bend on the top, and then I guess, and the bottom of it's like a nightstick, and you can use it to kind of massage your own back. I've heard good things about it. I'll probably get it at some point. It's one of those advantages and disadvantages. I like living in a smaller space, Carl, because it's like I don't have to worry about filling it with a bunch of shit, and it's easier to move. But at the same time, like when I buy things now, it's never about the cost. I just think about like where does it go. Like space is now my primary concern.
Yeah, I kind of see that. You kind of get into that because there are a lot of shit, a lot of things you want to have, but then it's, do I have the space for it, and how often would I use it?
Yeah. But I could give that one a shot. Write it off as a business expense. I'll do a video. 10 reasons why Theracane will get you the women. Number 6 will surprise you.
Well, you do the cooking shows now, so you should be able to expense a new kitchen.
Oh, dude. I wish that if it was I did the kitchen 1 year later, I would have been able to expense the whole thing too. People are finally teaching me about how to write stuff off as like a business on taxes. I told my friends how much I paid in taxes last year, and they just started laughing at me. He's like, dude, I didn't pay nothing. What are you writing off? And I explained, he's like, you're an idiot. He started showing me, he's like, you write off your gas, you write off your haircuts, you wear clothes on your streams, don't you? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, you write off your clothes. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sakes. And I'm like, is this how business works? Yes, yeah, you're in real business. Is this how it works?
Yeah, you take any write-off you can. Like, I even set up my own side company just to be able to write shit off there.
Oh. Yeah, and then Rich, he kind of explained to me, he was like, and that's great, and if they say you can't write that off, well, like, sorry, I didn't know, and then you can write a check, but like, and then he's like the manosphere thing. You know how they say don't talk a girl out of fucking you? Like, let her do that? He's like, it's like that, but for writing off. I was like, now it clicks, right?
Yeah, but it's true. Like, I buy all my computer equipment through companies. I buy a lot of clothes through it. Like, anything I can reasonably justify that they haven't explicitly said you can't expense. Mm-hmm. Like, I was tempted to try expensing all my weed smoking gadgets just to see if they'd let me get away with it.
Well, I mean, they could. Oh, no, that's right, because it's still sort of... No, but it's medical. I don't know how it works. I guess just write it off and let the auditors sort it out.
No,
make
like,
them work for their taxes.
Like, I just bought a bunch of tools and I just expensed them all by the company. And if someone asks, like, well, why isn't that at the company location? Why is that at your personal place of residence? Yeah, sorry, I had to have it delivered here. I just haven't been by yet.
It's kind of a clever way to put it. Or just have everything delivered to your business and... yeah, whatever. At this point, the taxes thing is boring. I was going to get back on topic. So the next one I saw was on our thing was being a natural versus learned. I like this one, and we kind of briefly talked about it at the beginning here, because chicks are naturals. Let's face it. Every girl's been hit on since she was 13. You don't think they are?
I don't think anyone is a natural. I think the difference is when you start doing something. And of course, you have, like, I'm sure there are talents that play into it. Like, if you're extroverted by genetics, that's going to help you. But I think most people, I think everyone is trained. It's just a few guys that get in very early. Like, everyone knows that dude who started kind of banging chicks when he was like 12, 13.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's to be fair. I don't know. Is there a better term for natural then? Like, early learner doesn't really roll off the tongue so well. But I think we're talking about the same thing. We're just quibbling about the term here.
Yeah,
the guy who learned it on his own, didn't require any type of outside guidance. He kind of just stumbled into it. And those guys, like I think you said, that was how you said it earlier. It's the problem is they don't know what worked. Because I remember I keep going back to that B.F. Skinner pigeon experiment, where the pigeons were put in a cage and the food dispenser would randomly disperse food pellets. And the pigeons would try like random rituals to try and get it to come out. They'd spin in circles and do whatever. And just from pure luck, some of these things would actually correlate with when they'd get food, and so they develop their weird rituals.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, like, at that point, that's how you make pigeons religious.
God damn it, we got the zealot pigeons. They're gonna take down the towers.
And like Chad doesn't know what works. He just kind of listened in to his older brother Brad, or he has an older sister who was a bit of a slut, so he was able to observe that type of thing. I think for the most part, at least the Chads I know that are kind of naturals, they're never the oldest born, but they almost universally have an older sister.
Actually, that's not.
Or a sister.
That's not half bad.
Or if they are the oldest born, they have a sister who's either a twin sister or was born shortly fucking thereafter. Like there's like a 1 to 2 year gap between them and their sister.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I'd have to think back further, but that kind of jives with what I know too. Actually, know one other thing else, and this might be because of my redneck upbringing, but I remember there was 2 Chads in particular I'm thinking of. One from my Taekwondo school and another one from my high school. And they would share stories. They basically got taken advantage of between like 10 and 13 by an older woman. And I think that kind of like destigmatized the whole thing for them. So it's almost like those kids who have like the school marms raping them in the school. They end up being Chads in their future. Which makes sense too, because the girls that get diddled by Uncle Touchy end up being like some of the biggest sluts.
Yeah, and I think it just comes down to they learn early on. And like I've kind of made my own little non-empirical experiment with this just by observation.
There he is with the Quan again. God damn it.
And if I look at like some of the things, okay, they all have sisters, or like at least they have women very close to their age group that they're hanging out with a lot.
Yeah.
Could be sister, could be cousin, could be girl next door, whatever, but they all have a lot of women in their life in that crucial age between, let's say, 11 and 15. Most of them are involved in some kind of activity that gives them social proof. So either sports, band, acting, something like that.
Yeah.
And most of them are extroverted, obviously.
Oh, yeah. I'd add
But I
to
haven't
all the
been able to
activities,
nail
too.
them.
One thing I found for our town was the guys that ended up having, like, part-time job at the mill while they were going to school. That was a big one for us. But I think that's just because those guys were able to buy beer more often.
Yeah, or maybe buy a car.
Yeah. Oh, and everybody had a car. It's a redneck town. If you can't get a car in a redneck town, something's wrong with you, man. $200, you'll find some piece of shit, and then some asshole will know how to fix the engine.
The point being that it's just a matter of they get things in early enough. They don't know what works. They just know what they think work. So it becomes like they become the pigeons because they think they have the answer. Mm-hmm. But kind of what they get shaped into Chad by the people around them at that early age.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, they don't know what parts of their personalities are attractive. And instead, David D'Angelo, Mystery, and a bunch of nerds have to observe them for 10 fucking years in the early 2000s.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because, like, there's false positives. I did 7 things. He doesn't know that only 2 of them worked, and that 5 of them would not work if it wasn't for those 2 things. But you're right, they don't know. So they just tell a guy everything. And that's... MGTOWs love this, too, because he always say about when girls say they love nerds, and then you're like, what a nerd is, and they just show, like, a bodybuilding, sexy, hot model with glasses on.
Yeah, it's like, who's the guy who plays Superman?
Oh, the 90s Superman?
No, like the modern one.
Oh, that WoW player. You guys, you should know. Aren't you in his guild? Actually, I wouldn't be surprised.
But anyway, when the girls say I'm into nerds, it's basically that guy with glasses.
Yeah. Because they don't know that it's like the aloofness or the dark triad stuff or the attractiveness or the status. They don't know about all that stuff. They just know that they feel attracted to this guy, and then they're looking quickly, scanning him over. What is it that makes him attractive? Oh, he's wearing flannel. Oh, he's got glasses. That must be it.
Yeah, like girls aren't able to tell you why they were attracted to a given dude. Because they will just give you like the most socially acceptable answer in that context.
Speaking of which, hilarious. So yeah, it was Henry Cavill, but then Steve Reeves. Of course, it was Steve Reeves. He was Sinbad. Goddamn. Oh, off topic. I have to tell the story. It's the funniest thing ever. In Canada, they have this thing called Molson Canadian House Party in the Rockies, And I remember the big thing was Metallica was going to be there this time. And then as they were getting off the bus, the Much Music guys, like our version of MTV, was like, "Who do you think's going to be here? Metallica, Metallica, Metallica." And then this last guy comes out, Rita McNeil. It's like, I don't know why. I just had the total fucking 90s flashback to that moment with the Steve Reeves line. Anyways, all right, I'm done distracting us from the real thing here. We're talking about naturals.
Yeah, so the point is, like, he identifies some things, and because of identifying a few things, he's able to kind of fall into and let life happen to him on a positive path.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to, like, you know how you do if you want to negotiate $1 million deal by age 25, you know what you have to do?
Have millionaire parents?
Exactly.
Damn, I'm nailing these things. I'm starting to learn this whole entrepreneuring thing. That's awesome.
And well, it's not necessarily a negative thing, but we tend to give ourselves credit. We give ourselves credit for our wins, and we blame other things for our failures, right?
Yeah, that's the human condition.
So when Chad gets girls and someone asks him, "Hey, Chad, I'd like to get girls too. What do you do?" He'll tell you, "Well, I'm just being me," or and you'll start to look at him and you'll be like, "Well, maybe I should get like long hair or whatever. Maybe that's the thing that works."
It's like what's that old pickup joke about the negging? Yeah, just gotta neg a girl a little bit, and the guy just goes over, negs a girl, she giggles, and the guy walks up to another girl. It's like, "Hey, fuck you, bitch," and then she just he's like, "I don't get it. It didn't work." Or the girls have to be assholes. Girls love guys who are assholes, so the guy just walks up and slaps a girl. And like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, that was a nice thing with Troy. He wrote a book called like How to Be the Asshole That Women Love, and it's kind of because there's something about you can be an asshole and you can be a lovable asshole, and that's that latter one you need to go for.
Yeah. Well, I think that's because you're right. When guys see asshole, they're ignoring the behaviors that actually make it attractive, and and the only thing they can focus on is the stuff that negatively correlates with success. Like they win in spite of those traits, and those are the ones they focus on, and that's why all of a sudden this stuff doesn't work. And I think that's where you get that goofy feedback loop, the black pill pigeons, where all they see the attractive behavior surrounded by unattractive qualities. They focus on the unattractive qualities, and then they assume, well, it's just genetics. There's nothing I can do about it. Ooh, what's this? Juan Doe, $2 super chat. The team friend with 40-centimeter arms getting all the puss.
Yeah, but it's kind of like because I think most of what makes someone attractive is social proof.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I think
100%.
most of it is a social function. I don't think because you can see like the muscle-bound bodybuilder, if you put him in the wrong context, girls may be attracted to him, but he'll be less successful than he will be in his native environment. And that goes into domain dependence. Like Rollo has a post on it. I think it's called... Well, I don't think it's called contextual alpha, but that's the topic. Like a teacher in a class of teenage girls is going to be in a situation where he's contextually an alpha.
Mm-hmm.
So girls are going to be more attracted to him when he's in that teaching context. Lose that job, girls are going to be less attracted to him. Same thing if you go into let's say you go into certain side roads of academia. The alphas there are going to be like the guys who are getting published the most, or doing the most groundbreaking research, or getting the most accolades and prizes.
Right.
And in gaming, it's going to be the guy who's the best at Dota or whatever. And then you have like the general sexual marketplace, but people forget that that's split into a large number of markets.
Yeah. I call it like it's a matrix organization. It's not just a single hierarchy, which is another thing people get extremely wrong with the Pareto principle. They think only 20% of guys across the world are getting anything. It's like, no, man. 20% of guys in your goofy little hobbyist club are getting something, and 20% of the people at the bar, 20% of the people at the office.
Yeah, and of course,
hundreds
if
of
you
little
did
Pareto
like
principles.
Yeah, and if you like theoretically did like the Olympics of fucking, you would probably find that okay, some of these are better than the others, but in the end, the results are the same.
Yeah, don't care, got laid.
And to me, it was always like well, not always, but the last years have been more about finding things that are compatible with the lifestyle I want. Like, I'm too old to run around doing shots at clubs until 4 o'clock in the fucking morning. I got shit to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to earn that though too, right? Like you've had your trophy, you've been there, you've done that, you got the thing, so you can be discerning. The guy who's never had a date before, he really can't afford to be, so he kind of has to slog through this uncomfortable shit. Like the virgin going, oh, I don't really like the bar atmosphere. It's like, I don't care. You also don't like jerking off at home alone, so fucking get on it. But you're here, like, if you got a triple digit notch count, you could be like, yeah, you know what? Keep your 9s and 10s, bro. I'm just going to have this one here. Low maintenance, good enough. And she jives with my lifestyle, and she doesn't cost me anything. That's good enough. But that's because you have to earn, like, preferences. I think that's what it comes down to. I know we've had an episode on this, too.
Yeah,
but
but
you don't know what your
also,
preferences are until you've had abundance.
No, but you also need experience to build preferences.
Yeah.
Because, like, at some point you're going to get into that situation where, like, okay, you're going to idolize something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many of you have watched How I Met Your Mother, but that's a great show if you want an example of putting pussy on a pedestal.
Was that, like, 10 years of trying to get Colby Smothers?
Yeah, something like that.
Meanwhile, Samuel L. Jackson just invites her to the Avengers, gets right in there.
Point being that, a lot of the 9s and I'd say the top 3 to 4% of like that whole sexual value scale are subjectively based on preferences.
Well, what was the rule of that one? And it was Red Pill Women talked about this. Of all the people that gave me some interesting advice was girls, and they're like, why you don't need to listen to a man's advice? It's because if a guy got fucked by goth girls, then he has a fetish for goth girls. Like, we're very good at learning to want what we have as opposed to getting what we want. And yeah,
there's also like we had that. I think we had like a rule 0 thing on that where we were kind of like joking around about like what are our preferences. Like Rolo likes thigh gaps.
Mm-hmm.
I only remember Rolo because he used the word thigh gapist, and I thought that was really funny at the time.
That's funny now. I remember I like jugs. I'm a boob man. I used to be a leg man, but I've since become a boob man.
Yeah, like I'm an ass man. So it kind of carries into different things, and those things alone are going to contribute to who you view as a 9 or a 10.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I hate the 9s and 10s, bros, because it's always everybody can agree on a 7. Everybody can agree on a 5. 9s and 10s, that's when you start seeing what a guy's ego wants, or what a guy's ego has gotten before. Because I don't know, man, some guys are throwing out the words 9 and 10 far too liberally. Like, I've seen a fat chick somebody said it was a 9. I'm like, that ain't it, guy. But I mean, that's our egos, right?
Yeah, it's your egos, and then there's the whole. I think youth plays into it as well, and perspective. Because like, if you're just looking to get laid, and you have no interest in plates, you have no interest in relationships, you just want to get your knot count up.
Yeah.
You're going to just go for the girls that hit your preference. And to some extent, like, you'll go for the girls that are available, that signal availability, right?
I was going to say, the single mom with borderline personality disorder is great for a guy just looking to rack up notches.
So, like, my take on that is just, like, you can't establish an empirical 9 to 10 scale, but you can get within a certain level. Like, you're not going to have a girl where, like, half the guys are like, yeah, she's a 9, and the other half is like, no, she's a 1. You're going to have, like, a certain correlation where, like, some guys are going to be like, okay, that's a 10. Some guys are going to be like, that's a 9. Some guys may go as low as 7, but there's going to be some variation in there. And it's always going to depend a little bit on context, too. Is this someone you're planning on just banging that night? Is this someone you're planning on plating? Is this someone you're planning to be in a relationship with? Because the more long-term relationship context is going to be, the more the... what do we call them when you buy a car? Like the
lemon
additional equipment on the car is going to be more important than the car itself.
Oh, yeah. The added features in that. See, I had an essay on this one. I never wanted a relationship and you don't either. I don't even like the walking in with expectations. I find, and I know I just said you shouldn't let life happen to you, but just like sleep with the girls that you want to sleep with. As you sleep with more girls, you become more discerning. And then of those girls, there's going to be a subset of them that want something more than just sex. They're going to start showing investment. They're going to clean your house while you're away. They're going to snoop through your stuff to see if you got any other girls. They're going to want to be your friend on Facebook. And I find that group kind of like, that's your options for relationships. And they're the ones fighting for you. And I find that's, in my experience, far better as a long-term strategy, because then you have investment. And then the whole time is while they're trying to, hook you, you're assessing them at that point. But I find I can't walk into something assuming that this one might be the one. I kind of have to walk into her and have her slap me over the head with I'm the one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but wasn't that a Royce thing too, though? Like, if you want a girl who's like a 1 to 3 points lower than you on the SMV scale or something like that?
Oh, I know the one. Yeah, where get a girl that's slightly less attractive than you because she'll be more loyal. I don't know on that one how much I believe that. I really don't. Like, I've only ever heard it from Royce and then the occasional MGTOW guys. I haven't had enough data points coming in to say it's like an emergent thing.
Then you have to consider that it's also a contradiction of what we just said, because if let's say you have a deviation of 3 within the SMV scale for male judgment, you're always going to have that same deviation when you're doing the judgment of who's 1 to 3 points below you.
Yeah. Yeah, that right there. And not only that, it's like time sensitive. Like, you can't just take a snapshot. I'm an 8, she's a 5. All right, I'll wife her up. 5 years from now, I mean, age affects all of us, right? You get more attractive, she gets less attractive, or vice versa. Yeah, I just don't see it working as a long-term strategy, because in the same reason that I hate vetting. Like, you're trying to take a snapshot strategy and apply it longitudinally, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and that was kind of like why I brought that habits topic through Rule Zero a couple of weeks back, was just on the basis that if your girl has had a habit of working out for 15 years, odds are she's going to keep that habit up.
Yep.
If your girl has had a habit of, like, never putting makeup on unless she's leaving the house and not showering unless she's leaving the house, she's probably going to keep doing that, and you're going to end up eating smelly box.
Smelly is subjective. Just hold your nose and get in there. Yeah, there was something
Plus,
actually on that episode.
I love this. Yeah, I love this scene too from like How I Met Your Mother, where and I know that's the second reference to the show, but I've been rewatching it due to a like intermittent COVID lockdown. And like at one point, the dude is like, they go to the gym, and like one of the dudes is in a full fucking suit, and they're like, "Why are you in a full suit at the gym? Aren't you working out?" "No, I'm here to invest. I pick up the fat chicks through working out, because that way when they get hot, I'll be like their first choice to get in there."
I guess, like, I don't know, man. That whole Barney character thing. Every now and then, I was like, I can't tell if he's trying to be a satire of like the pickup culture, or if he's a guy who's just like really clever about it and he just makes a joke, like he lampoons it, but it's like out of love. And I never could tell which one it was.
I think it's a mix of both, because you get the hyperbole in the character. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's accurate enough that someone who wrote that character has
he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if like Archwinger or Whisper wrote that fucking character.
How funny would that be? You find out somebody doxes Archwinger, and it turns out he's like some Hollywood writer, works in the office across from Delicious Tacos, and he does most of this. I did Everybody Loves Raymond, and then Big Bang Theory, and How I Met Your Mother.
Well, for me, it was just like it's because like I love satire and I love parody. Those are two of my favorite forms of humor.
Oh, same.
But they get really bad if done heavy-handed, and the Barney character is done so subtly. Like, you can't tell, is he lampooning? Is he just like a caricature? Is he just making fun of it with love? You can't tell, and that's good satire either way. And like, I love seeing like the stupidity of the culture that we're involved in here anyway.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of stupid to take from.
Yeah, that's my favorite. My favorite satire is satire that, like, they trick me. I can't tell. Or if I guess it wrong right away, like Starship Troopers was good for that. But I was a kid, right? I thought, this is a great action movie. RoboCop, great action movie. And then as I grow up and I find out it's satire, and now I get like, I'm like, you guys fooled me for like a decade. Well done. And that's like one of my favorite movies now.
Well,
I
it's the
think
same
it's
thing with I think I've talked about him before, like Tom Lehrer. He was like a
yeah.
Harvard level mathematician
Hmm.
and one of the best satirists of his generation.
He was the one that always did the piano shit with the bow tie, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah, yeah. And his songs were always like, to me, that's the gold standard of satire.
Boy, you guys, this is like an 80s reference. You're going to have to look this thing up here. I think The
80s.
Simpsons
This
did a
is a
joke on it in the
fucking
90s.
50s, 60s reference.
Wasn't he around in the 80s too? Or I guess they referenced
No,
him in
no.
the 80s because the kids were growing up in the 50s. Fair point. Fair point.
But he was doing like satire songs about the bombing of Germany during World War II and the U.S. paperclipping Nazi scientists over and shit.
Okay, I didn't even know about that stuff. I just remember him talking about like the deficits and stuff like that. But
Yeah, the
that's fucking
funniest
funny.
fact about him though is he invented the Jello shot.
What? That's an
Yeah, because
odd factical.
because it's kind of like because he's a weird guy, but like he's a mathematician that taught at Harvard. He's a satirist, and then he invented the Jello shot. And the reason he did that was because he was serving in the military at the time in some kind of World War II research trip,
Hmm.
and they couldn't bring alcohol in for Christmas.
Oh.
So he figured out he could bring all the guys that were serving Jello.
And he just put vodka
And
into it.
yeah, and the dude on guard didn't bother checking the Jello.
Dude, that's goddamn. Whatever happened? Like, I miss these days and like Feynman and that. Remember when nerds used to be cool?
Oh yeah.
Now nerds are the most insufferable pricks ever. Like, I was right after the 80s was like peak when nerds were cool. Like Revenge of the Nerds and that, and the nerds end up getting the girl. And I don't know what changed. Now it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson deciding, I'm going to ruin everybody's party. Well, actually, the cake isn't a lie. And you're like, oh, for fuck's sakes, dude.
Well, I think it changed I think the type of nerd changed.
How so?
Because there's a certain difference between the nerds that grew up freaking phone boxes and like the fun was just like, okay, let's see if I can break into NASA and get shuttle blueprints for Wall.
Yeah.
There's a certain anti-establishment vibe in those nerds versus the nerds of like the late 90s and 2000. They're like, oh, please accept us, please accept us. And the nerds of the 80s like, we're gonna break into a sorority house and put hidden cameras and that shit.
Oh, man. I remember that was like the biggest 80s trope was to sneak a camera into the ladies' shower. And for some reason, girls had pillow fights in the shower, which made no sense. But whatever. It's the 80s. What was that? Porky's Revenge, Ski School, Police Academy. So I was a teenage sex mutant. There's like a dozen of these things. I could rifle off half
I
of
know.
them. You're like, please stop. Oh,
But
Spaced
I just
Out.
think, like I said, I just think it's a difference in nerd, and it's the same thing with because, like, not to be like nerd excluding here, but like you have way too many people who are claiming to be nerds now. You're not a nerd because you have a fucking Nintendo Switch.
Where the antisocial are trying to take on the title nerd, but they miss all the inquisitiveness and the knowledge that a nerd should bring to the table.
Yeah, so it's kind of like where we came up with like the division between nerd and geek. That the people you'd call nerds in like the 70s and 80s are geeks, and the people who are like fighting over who's better at Super Smash Bros. Are nerds.
I know there's like 3 blue checks that are in my like on my Twitter follows right now that are like literally doing that, which is funny. Sam, he's a Dutch guy, pretty funny guy though. He used to do pickup, but then he switched over and now he's into Jesus. Good for him. He's not a prick about it though, so I always liked him.
Yeah, but if you're into Jesus or if you're into girls, either way, you're probably gonna end up getting nailed.
But bump. All right. I guess we're halfway
Hey, no Austrian
through.
Payton references so far.
No, which reference? Oh, Austrian. Yeah, well, that's your job. I've been trying to avoid saying them because they've been coming up so frequently. Like, it's usually due to COVID now. Like, some guys talking about that's the big argument now is that we need to make a 2-tier society, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And all these political pundits are suggesting it. And that was my satirical joke. It's like, I like that. Maybe we should make, like, blue stars and pin them on the chest of vaccinated people. And then, I don't know, we'll pick a different color for unvaccinated people, maybe yellow ones.
Yeah, at the same time, though,
But that one was like not very subtle satire. And then the next joke was like, yeah, well, okay, apparently that one's already taken.
Yeah, but to some extent, I kind of agree.
To get the yellow stars?
Not the yellow stars bit, but I do think that if you create an incentive to get vaccinated, more people will do it, and that will help in achieving herd immunity.
Oh, for sure. Stick or carrot,
That is, well, how do you tell the difference? If, let's say we said that, okay, all vaccinated people are free from quarantines and masks.
Mm-hmm.
Are we giving that as a carrot to people to get vaccinated, or is that a stick used against unvaccinated people that they can't, travel and they have to wear fucking masks?
Well, let's go with the underlying thing. Who the fuck are you to tell me what I can and can't do? Like, you know what I mean? I think that's the argument I've always taken to it. It's like, I'm not prepared. I mean, Canada, we've got a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's pretty straightforward, and I don't want to get into this a bunch because we're going to fuck up the podcast, but...
Oh, yeah.
So I'm kind of just like, okay, so these are the rules that we've all decided on. Let's live by these rules. And if you're going to start saying, I'm just going to ignore these rules and do my own thing, to my response to that, it's like, yeah, fuck you. You can't just ignore laws when you feel like it. You don't like that when somebody's stealing your car.
Well, yes, you can.
Well, I mean, obviously...
Right now, you have some dudes in, I think it's Vancouver or Toronto, handing out free heroin.
Oh, yeah, but that's... You're hitting all of the political things there. That one, I understand that. That's an admission that the drug war is not useful. And these guys are going to score heroin anyway. But if you have the guys handing it out, at least then they aren't dying in the street. They're not leaving needles at the park. It's basically saying, you guys are fucked. So we're going to kind of isolate you away here and keep everybody else safe by... And that's no different than when you were like 16 and your mom used to boot for you. I don't know if yours did. Mine did. And I'm like, why are you buying... And everybody's like, why are you buying liquor for your kid? Because he's underage. He goes, well, now I know what he's drinking. He's not going to drink too much. And if he runs into trouble, he's going to call me to pick him up.
I completely agree with you. I'm just pointing out that's a principle level decision, right? So you either have to agree with that across the board or you have to disagree with it across the board. And I don't like the Baskin-Robbins approach to politics. So the way I see it is that if you're going to be like, okay, we're going to ban drug use and we're going to say that you can't put this stuff in your body because ABC, then we also can't say you have to put this shit in your body because ABC. You have to pick both or one, both or none.
Oh, I'd agree with you, ideally. But that's that weird place we're in right now where everybody has to have like a hypocrisy to them. And then we have to like work within that Hippocratic system. Well, we're going to make drugs illegal, except for these ones we're giving you because, yeah. The whole thing's fucked. This is why I can see why everybody always switches to politics at some point, because there's like a never-ending source of content. Like, if you're not creative enough to come up with a 2-hour podcast, you could rant about this shit forever. Good job,
but
Sargon of Cod.
It's the same thing we're on about when we were talking about the Kantian perspective, though.
Yeah.
Is that, okay, it's pure reason is essentially principles, right?
Right.
And you don't... You either follow a principle or you don't. It's binary. And then you have empiricism and consequentialism where you're like, okay, we're going to do away with this principle thing and we're going to approach things on a case-by-case basis using knowledge.
Right.
And we're going to observe the results of doing that and we're going to see, is this working? Is it not? If it's not working, we fix it. If it's working, we'll do better, right? And I like the latter approach.
How so?
Well, I just tend to think that, okay, principles are good for a very, very selected set of things.
Okay.
Data and observation of results are good for most things.
Okay.
Because, like, you can have as a principle, you need to approach 100 girls a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go approach 100 girls, right?
Right.
But if I told you you had to approach 100 girls a day, are you going to have in-depth conversations, or are you just going to walk up to 100 girls and be like, hey, what's the time? Oh, it's 10:30.
Oh, yeah. The guys that just, like, treat that as, like, as long as you approach 100, the magic will happen, and they're forgetting there's an underlying principle you're trying to learn. And so they just literally walk up and blab whatever and don't learn a thing.
Yeah, and conversely, if you look at empiricism and consequentialism, you're looking at two things. You're looking at, okay, I'm doing A. What are the results of A? Are those the results I want? If yes, continue. If no, stop. Do something else.
Right.
And the latter one lets you include new information as you go along in a way that principles don't.
Which is funny too, because you just talked about it across the board thing, and this one's more of like the Baskin Robbins approach. So I kind of, and it's, I love the red pill stuff in the fact that like everything is contradictory. So you kind of have to apply things as they work, or not.
Let me be a little bit more precise here to steal that Jordan Peterson thing. If you're claiming to run a rule or principle based approach to things, you cannot Baskin Robbins it. If you're running an empirical consequentialist mode, you can Baskin Robbins it because you're supposed to.
I wonder if that's why, as a praxeology, red pill has been working so well, because we're essentially in that consequentialist place. Everybody's just, if this works for me, I'm doing it this way. If it doesn't work for me, I'm going to argue against it on principle. But it's a very Baskin Robbins-y. And it makes sense because most red pill stuff has kind of like, if you can't beat them, join them attitude to it. Which is why so many of the trads get mad that the red pill guys are ruining our women. It's like, yeah, we haven't been around long enough to do that, buddy. And there's not a lot of us. It's almost like an admission that the gender war is over and we lost. I wonder who said that.
I don't necessarily think there was ever a gender war.
Oh, of course there wasn't. But if you can't describe things in terms of like some masculine concept as a war, guys will just ignore it. Oh, there's a war. Feminists are trying to take your guns and your gerbs.
Because it's also that like kind of approach to things that you never had a war on drugs. You had a war on people who use drugs. Mm-hmm. And those people were very specifically targeted by Richard Nixon as anti-war people and black people.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why the consequences of the drug war always hit certain communities and certain groups disproportionately. There's a reason why like the prison sentence for half a kilo of powder coke, was a lot lower than the sentence for like 50 grams of crack.
Well, because of the demographics that used each one. It was almost like a branding thing. Yeah, well, if you're using Coke versus Pepsi, well, the Pepsi guys, I don't trust them.
But then again, like I think most things are stupid. No offense. Like I think I just visited like the evangelical branch of the family last week.
Ooh, that must have been fun.
Yeah, it's always fun because it's always nice to kind of get the info for what's going on in that side of the space. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, it's never measurable. And it's kind of like, some people like to joke that science has a liberal bias. And I don't really think that's the case. I think that we based our society around a lot of non-empirical things. And now we finally have the ability to test if they're actually working, and most of them turn out not to.
Yeah. Like literally moons made out of cheese kind of shit. May have worked in the 60s, but not today, or the 1800s or whatever. Totally agree.
Yeah, but the Jewish and Muslim ban of pork makes sense when pork is a risky meat to eat. It doesn't make sense when pork is filled with antibiotics.
But that's the problem, is like, because I guess it's Lindy, or I don't know, where Muslims aren't going to go changing their religion because they don't remember why the religious edict happened. They just know that, Allah said it, so that's it. That's as far as they need to look into it.
Yeah, looking at this whole thing with chivalry, I think chivalry was originally like Bushido. It was a warrior's code, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of what we think of as chivalry today is just basic, well, not basic politeness, but more a person showing magnanimity from a position of power. Mm-hmm. Which is different from being a doormat.
And I would say, too, his Agincourt peasant longbowman thing, no, it's World War I killed it, man. Because World War I is when we got mechanized war. Because before then, in the Napoleonic Wars and shit, like, the knights, the aristocrats that were leading armies, they never got shot. They were kidnapped. They were never attacked directly. Other than the American Revolution, but that doesn't count. But in World War I, mustard gas didn't give a shit how rich you were. And we lost, like, a whole generation of aristocrats. And so rich people realized pretty quickly, yeah, I get we can be like the noblesse obligé, but if we're just going to die out there, I'm not going to war. And that's why you stopped having rich kids going to war and it started being seen as like a gross thing to do. And then getting out of it was the best thing.
Well, it's that's like the core of like the Fortunate. I always thought that was funny, by the way, when Trump was playing Fortunate Son as at his rallies.
Oh, yeah, but that's because satire is like your favorite type of humor. And he couldn't have done better satire if he tried.
But kind of like the point of it being that war used to be an honorable thing, right? It used to be like you proved yourself worthy of being part of the aristocracy by going to war. That's why, like, if you go to Germany,
Yeah.
you'll find a lot of military families.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And the reason for that is back then the only way for a peasant to rise in society was to join the military. Because if you rose in the ranks in the military, you could rise to nobility, but that was like the only upward mobility that existed.
Heck, even today it still exists for that upward like economic mobility.
But at the same time though, like if you're already rich, why would you send your kids? Like most people try to do as well as they can in this life to give their kids a good head start. And that's why I think it's kind of a completely to the fucking side of what we're discussing in this podcast. But most of the wealthy people today are wealthy either because of their own ability or the ability of their people in the past. And I think generational wealth deserves some degree of respect just on the basis that it's fucking hard to maintain wealth over 5, 10, 15 fucking generations.
Dude, wasn't it 3 generations? It's supposed to be if you have like inherited insane wealth by 3 generations, it's diluted to the point of nothingness. I can't remember who quoted that one. Some economist. You're probably smarter than me.
I think it's probably Piketty or something. Anyway, the point being that generational perspectives are good, and I also think that publicly traded companies are bad.
Well, bad in what? Because they're good in being bigger. Publicly traded companies were able to grow really fast, but I agree.
Well, in terms of let's say sustainability is a good term to use. It's kind of a political term, but the reason I think they're good is, let's say you were the CEO of Stone Enterprise, and that your great grandfather started that company back in like the 1880s.
Okay.
Are you going to fuck up like 4 generations of your family name by doing something shady now?
Probably not, because you're accountable. I get what you're saying. Publicly traded, there's no accountability because there's just millions of investors, and no single person was the reason that you sold it to China or whatever.
So I think that works as a form of accountability, because I think you need the accountability to be there in order for humans to behave right. But then it goes into like what is right, and that comes back into like the critique of pure reason, the practical reason, and the Kantian categorical imperative, which is only act as if your actions in that context would become universal law.
Yep.
So let's say if girl hits on you, tells you, "Hey, I have a husband, but I just want to fuck you tonight," then okay, what would happen to society if every guy who got hit on by a married woman fucked her? Would that be good or bad? And that's where the categorical imperative comes in. But then again, the outcome of that is preference.
See, I don't think we're in a time, though, that applies. I make a reference to yellow-throated lizards for that. I don't know if you've remembered this one, where there's a certain type of like lizard. They live on rocks out in the desert somewhere in Arizona or something like that. There's yellow, blue, and red-throated. They're all the same species, though, and the blue-throated lizards are big. They can own like 3-4 different outcroppings of rocks, and every rock has a chick on it. So they basically have a soft harem. The problem is they can't watch them all at the all time. So the red-throated lizards are very small and sneaky, and they could sneak in there and impregnate one of the lizards while the blue guy is off fucking somebody else because he can't watch them all at the same time. So then they're able to take over. But the problem with that is the yellow ones are bigger than the red-throated lizards, but smaller than the blue-throated lizards. They're able to, like, I can guard a rock and get all the red guys out of there, right? So they get their one lizard, they make their lizard babies, but then the blue one's bigger than all of them, so we can just scare a bunch of them off, and then it's like this weird cycle. And I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but it's the same thing. The pure reason, the Kantian things, act as if you want to have it as universal law. I think that creates an environment where cheaters to the system can thrive. And now cheaters, I would argue right now, it's a cheater's market. People who cheat the system do well. Absolutely. But that's the problem, is that until a tipping point arrives where everybody is cheating, cheaters are going to continue to thrive. Until finally there's enough cheaters in the system that a stable rule set like that Kantian thing will take over. But I don't think we're going to see that in our lifetime. I really don't.
I agree and I disagree with you. I agree with you on the lizard analogy. I just think it's always been beneficial to cheat.
Well, for
That's
some
why we have
people to cheat,
religion.
not everybody to cheat.
No, but that's why we have religion, right? Because you're supposed to keep the idiots that believe that shit in line, while the people who tell everyone you have to believe this shit are cheating. There's a reason why you have tunnels into the fucking Vatican that they use to smuggle in their mistresses.
Oh, yeah.
So
I
my
knew
view
they
has
weren't
always
celibate.
been...
Mistresses, though. I think you narrow down that age demographic, I think.
It's actually funny because Catholic priests used to be able to marry and have kids.
When did that change again?
Back in like the 14, 15, 1600s some point, because what happened was that the cardinals would get huge plots of land from the church. But when they had a family, the kids would just inherit that from the cardinal and the church would lose the property. So at that point, they banned them having wives and children because it was killing the finances of the Catholic Church.
And because the church always wants people to get married, they couldn't exactly just have them live out of wedlock, and hence the mistress tunnels.
Yeah, for the most part. Plus,
Goddamn clever system they got going there.
it's always kind of been my argument against like the tradcon perspective that, okay, the trad world you were imagining never existed. Like the chick in the 50s was fucking the milkman. The chick in the 1920s was a flapper girl. The chick during like the Industrial Revolution was fucking around just to make ends meet.
Yeah,
And I think
Victorian
it's
girls
just
would drink
always
absinthe and jerk off in the absinthe bars. Like, chicks were always chicks. They're just getting, they just never had the brashness to rub a guy's nose in it like they are today. I think that's the only difference.
yeah. Now they are. Now it's suddenly becoming apparent to most guys what's actually going on.
It is interesting
thing
too to
with
see the adoption techniques guys take.
Well, I think that's a big thing. I think most guys don't want to adapt. That's why they kind of wish for this trad life.
Which is very strange too. That's the shitty part, and that's like to bring this all the way back to our bucket on head stuff. You got these guys swearing by the trad life stuff, but the problem is it's going to be 20 years until they find out it doesn't work, or does work, but it won't. So they're going to convince a lot of guys who want it to be true that it is true. But 20 years from now, they're all going to be fucked, and they're going to start telling everybody it doesn't work. And there's going to be a new group of guys that still want the trad thing to work, and they'll say, oh, those are just old, bitter guys. It's almost like there's a mathematical certainty that a certain amount of guys are going to fail, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I think that's correct. I think it's only now that it's been this obvious. And I think that's what's changed with social media is that guys' faces are being rubbed in it.
I'm making this a new
Because,
topic. There we go.
you've always had, I think you've always had incels. It's like, if you look at data, it's like only 1/3 of men reproduce or something like that ridiculousness.
Yeah. Oh, the one
So
in
you've always
17
had
thing.
that?
Yeah.
So you've always had that, but I think now it's being kind of pushed into guys' faces a lot more than it's ever been. And I think it's the appearance of inequality that creates more trouble rather than there being actual inequality.
I know there's like an Aesop fable that talks about this. I just know it. It just seems like the kind of thing. Something about people would rather be ignorant. Whatever. But yeah, I agree. To answer Cold Steel, the answer is yes. Is it female nature or male simp nature? Yes. It's human nature.
I think men are adaptable. Like I wrote like an early essay called "How Men Compete: Building a Better Mousetrap"
Mm-hmm.
that deals with intrasexual competition, and I think simping is just an adaptation strategy. Same
Yeah.
thing as sneaky fucker, same thing as alpha, same thing as sigma, etc. Like the beta male strategy is to latch onto an alpha and catch his spoils.
Right.
Like the
The roadie
gamma
for a
strategy,
band.
yeah, or like the whatever. And every kind of like level of the social sexual hierarchy has like an adaptive strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Like gammas is false, is narcissism, so they pretend to be the king and hope that some girl will believe them. And I'm not even sure what delta is. There a delta?
Yeah, Delta. Okay, Jesus. Delta was what people think of when they say beta male is actually a delta by Vox's definition. If you guys don't know, we're talking about Vox Day's social sexual hierarchy. It's not the best model, but it's whatever. But yeah, the alpha was like king dingaling, guy gets all the puss. The beta was the one you said before. He gets the scraps. He's the friend that brings beer to the party. And then delta was like your average Joe, what you would think of when people say beta male. And then Gamma was the narcissist who thought of himself as a Sigma, and the Sigma, God, this is cringy. And then the Sigma was the guy that nobody knew who he was, but he came to the party with a hot chick on his sleeve, and everybody doesn't know, like, how the hell is this guy top tier? And there was Omega, was he never even got invited to the party, and then he said something about a lambada, which I think had something to do with polygamy, but I don't fucking know. It's Vox,
Yeah.
he's like, hey, how can I make this thing needlessly complicated for no reason? I have an
Yeah,
idea.
that's a fair point. But anyway, the point was like all of these are male adaptive strategies. Like men simp because they think that will get them laid. The same reason as like the blue pill game or whatever. It's just a strategy they've adopted because it may have worked once, like the red pill girl said, and they keep doing it because if it works twice every 10 years, then that validates it.
Yeah. And plus, let's say it's a dead strategy. Let's say maybe it worked well in the 1940s or whatever, and it's dead now. You're going to have a whole generation, multiple generations before that strategy finally dies off. If guys keep trying it and there's some hereditary reason that they're trying it, that entire generation of people are going to have to die off, and the ones who do better strategies are going to have to live and procreate more. But now we're talking like evolution, and evolution has a time scale of eons. We have a time scale of decades. So we
You're
could.
not necessarily talking evolution, but you're talking to the one thing that annoyed the shit out of me with you the first few times we did podcasts together.
What's that?
With it, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent thing, which is it's a time scale horizon thing, and it's
Yeah.
like if you are doing an outdated strategy today, odds are that's not going to become successful in your lifetime. But odds are the market is going to self-correct at some point, but it may not be in the time scale that you have. So you have a gap between your preferred time scale and the market's preferred time scale, or evolution's preferred time scale, or whatever you want to say.
Oh, I can see why you're annoyed by it. Yeah.
And well, both are valid perspectives, and your perspective is more valid to the guys who are listening now. My perspective is more valid for people who are just kind of bored with this shit and want to try and predict where we're going next.
Ah. Yeah, I try to avoid the too much navel gazing about it. Not because I don't think it's valid or there's use for it. I just think it's too easy to get it wrong. And I don't see the primary problem guys have now is that they aren't forward thinking enough. I think it's the guys are too forward thinking to the point of missing what's right in front of them.
I just think what's going to happen is that all the girls who are currently traveling back and forth to Dubai, getting shit on by sheiks, are going to need husbands, and they're going to be ready to grab up like the top 8 out of 10 guys for that, or these 7 out of 10 guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. Dude, Thirst has destroyed the concept of the wall. There is always somebody going to be there to pick up the pieces, and probably a better guy than the dude who's expecting a revenge fantasy too. I think that's the
Hey.
part that's going to hurt the most.
Well, you see it all the time. You see porn stars who did gangbangs live on TV virtually get married. So there's always going to be some guy there to catch them.
To pastors too. The guy's running the church, so they get the top tier guy in the church. At the end of it, they even keep their porn names. It's still Candy with an I and the heart on the top. Now she's with Reverend Lovejoy. You're like, what the hell? How did that work?
I'm just waiting for when Kamala Harris starts dating Johnny Sins.
But hey, I don't know. I think it's good. I think guys need to see this. What do we always say? It's like the society that treats their women the best tends to thrive the longest. It's been the longest strategy that's worked for human beings since before we got into caves and we're still hanging off of trees.
And
so,
I do
yeah.
generally, and like my thing is, like, I think the reason why the West became dominant and is dominant right now is a change we made back in the 1600s, 1700s-ish, Enlightenment time.
You got me perked.
Well, what we did was, before that, if you invented something awesome, the king would just take it for himself and you wouldn't get shit.
Right.
But once people could organize it and start their own business, so if you invented something really fucking clever, you would become a rich person and become a powerful person in that society. That led to an incentive to create, to be innovative, and to change things. And throughout history, the society that aligned the closest with empiricism tended to be the one that thrived the most.
Right.
Whether that's the Japanese who dominated like the most of Asia because they had better swords and swordsmanship, or if it's the Vikings that had guerrilla tactics in a time where you'd show up on a battlefield with like 10,000 men and just punch each other in the face until everyone on one side was dead. Or if it's the German tank brigadier who wrote the book on how tank warfare back in like the between World War I and
The Blitzkrieg?
That wasn't. No, I think it was actually, if I remember correctly, it was an American or an Englishman who wrote like the book on tank warfare. They were universally panned in their own countries, but the Germans read the fuck out of it.
And didn't
And
they
that's
steal
what they
that from the
based the
French
Blitzkrieg
anyway?
on.
Because that was like the Napoleonic technique, was to like work faster, work with speed, get behind the line, and then like live off of the land, and then get to the capital.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
And it's
not the
like
greatest at this
Foxwolf
stuff,
is saying
but-
too, like China for like the last 5 to 6,000 years, they've had the greatest inventions, but the local lord would just hoard it for himself.
Well, thank God that's changed now that they're under the new the new rulers.
Well, now it might have changed again because democracy is not problematic in smaller groups.
Oh, it doesn't scale.
Reasonably, no, democracy doesn't scale at all. And at that point, I can see you can hear my day drinking at 1.0 live playback speed. Nice. Now you're seeing that like a communist-ish ruling dictatorship in China lets them have a much longer-term view than most Western governments.
Right. Because
So
they
they
don't worry
don't
about
have
the
to
next
think-
election cycle.
Yeah, they don't have to think I need results to bring up in 4 years for the next election. They can be like, well, fuck them. We'll show them in 20 years.
I don't know. I kind of like the Dutch system. Like, I didn't know about the Dutches. And Dutchy will be able to confirm this if he's in the chat, where they have their normal government, but then they have a government that's specifically designed just for, like, water management. Like, keep the dikes going, make sure we don't get flooded in the floodplains and that. And those ones, that's all long-term solution. They still do elections just like everybody else, but it's a specific government for a specific task. I kind of like that one then. It's kind of like using a VLAN for life, for governance, you know? As opposed to one government does everything. You have a government that does, politics, a government that does just water management. And then it's nice in that you get to set your values. For the Dutch, obviously, it's not flooding. Maybe in Canada, we'd have a specific government just for land management or whatever.
Well, I saw one that were doing something similar. Can't remember who it was, but one of their big problems was infrastructure spending.
Okay.
Because, like, the budget for roads and trains and so on would change based on who was in government, and the priorities would change, or like they would run regular budget years, so they'd be able to build for like 10 months of the year. They had to rig the whole thing down, wait for 2 months until they got a new button, more money, and then start up again.
Oh.
And instead, what they did is they essentially set down like an infrastructure, not a government, but like an infrastructure authority independent of the government. and they get, I think, budget periods of 8 years running. So if they use all their budget in 5 years, but they accomplish what they were supposed to do in 8, it's okay.
Yeah. It's goal
And that
oriented.
just and politicians have nothing to do with what they build and when they build it. It's all based on essentially people who work with infrastructure continuously. So like, okay, we're seeing like a 15% spike in travel to this town, so we need to upgrade capacity here. And that actually worked.
Right? It's funny. The military actually had that problem that you're talking. Well, the problem that your thing addresses. So, for example, the Conservative Party would get into government, and they would have like 8-9 years in office, Harper government, and then Trudeau's government would take over. And what happens is they would procure new warships, and new warships they take like a couple years to plan, a couple years to build, a couple years to deploy, and then you get all the way through, spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and then the Liberal government would take over. And then they want to put their own thing on it, so they kibosh all the previous programs and they work on their own. What ended up happening is we had submarines, bought them from the British. We were going to refurbish them and use them ourselves for underwater warfare training. The governments would change, the funding would stop, the project would go, but they've already agreed to like a maintenance schedule. And so we ended up having just a 10-year, essentially a jobs welfare program, where this submarine, it was in dry dock longer than I was in the military. And it was just, guys would start at the back of the ship. Oh, the parts are due for repair, work all the way to the front. But because they never got the funding to actually get the thing water ready by the time it got to the front, well, the parts in the back are due for repair. And then they just kept doing this cycle for years. It ended up being like hundreds of $1 million waste. Like the amount of waste, we would have been better off if we had just bought brand new submarines. And I was just like, that is not efficient or useful at all. And it's the Canadian military. Our underwater, we don't have underwater warfare. We had one sub go out once, and it fucking burned and killed like 7 people. So our subs have killed more Canadians than anything.
Well, I think the Foxwolf has a great comment in chat right now that it's politics, so I kind of don't want to address it, but I kind of want to address it.
Yeah, what the hey? We got 20 more minutes. I think you guys learned enough sex today.
What I tend to think is that you need huge uniting causes in order to create a country, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, the reason why social democratic parties are doing worse in Europe is essentially due to the fact that most people in Europe, they have 4 or 5 weeks paid vacation, they have good salaries, they have good parental leave, and so on. Mm-hmm. So, while Churchy McChrist and Ratty McRadical could agree on, like, yeah, fuck that guy. I want to be paid properly. I want my vacation. I want my paternity leave. And I don't want to work fucking 12 hours on Saturday.
Okay.
They can agree on that. But once you fix that, what's left that they agree on? Virtually nothing.
Yeah. But that's and I don't know it's their fault for wanting to quibble about all the other stuff to ignore the big thing. Or that's a psyop. That's how you split and conquer and whatever. But to be fair with this here, we already have, like, what do you guys think between NAFTA and NORAD? Like, what do you think the Canada and the coastal U.S. city has? Like, we're basically a quasi nation state. Free trade across the border, free travel. We don't even have to use passports. We have Nexus cards. We've already got that. It's leaning that direction.
Yeah, you're seeing the same thing in Europe because you have agreements that you can travel freely between all the EU countries. You also have all the EU agreements and so on that are working to standardize all across the union.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're kind of getting to the point where I think that there are bigger differences between people who are in one country living in cities or rural places versus like people who live in a city, and let's say people in London are more similar to people living in Rome than they are to people living in Yorkshire.
Oh, 100%. You're talking about like city mouse, country mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with it. Hell, half the people in Toronto think this is just like New York, only cleaner. It's like, no, it's not, man. First off, it's more like Chicago minus the murder. Secondly, whatever, that's going to be my little pro-Canada speech, and I'm like, that's wasted effort. But no, I agree, and all this stuff. And I guess for adapting, I'd put it this way. This is picture the most popular guy on YouTube right now. A Swedish-born London citizen with an Italian wife making videos for an American audience. Like, you can say blah, 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 globalism, this and that, but that's kind of the way As much as you want to say like stick in your nation, just build for your own, buy local, it's like clearly it's dead. That's what the new people are doing right now. And if you really want to
Yeah,
adapt,
people
I
are.
would say you have to kind of get on board with it.
Yeah, but what you're having though is you're having like that boomer backlash. Because like, remember when they started putting out smoking bans?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
How many people fought? Like afterwards, they're almost universally fucking loved. But as they were putting them in, like people were protesting, like bars and clubs were going to close forever. Like half the bars and clubs were going to go bankrupt if people weren't able to smoke in there and so on. Huge fights, but in the end, most people just quit smoking.
It was
And I
the
think you
weirdest
can,
thing. Oh, fun fact: when I moved to Montreal, we went in there from British Columbia, which is probably one of the hardest like anti-smoking places ever. And they were just out in a bar, and people were smoking in the pub, and it was like it's like we ended up on a time machine. Like I'd never seen that, and we saw smoke. Like remember when smoke used to hang in the air,
yeah, yeah.
and you always see that haziness to it, even though you're in the non-smoking area. We walked in there, and it was like it's just so weird to see right now that they even do it. But that's Quebec. It's always 15 years behind everybody else when it
Yeah,
comes
but
to
you're going to see the like right now. You're going to see the backlash with people moving from like fossil fuel cars to electric cars. You're going to see more of a movement in cities towards less cars, more public transportations, more bicycles, etc. You're going to get a movement away from like factory farming, maybe less meat, more veg, whatever. And you're going to see all these movements, but that's going to upset all the boomers who've essentially lived their lives with huge engines, huge steaks, and a lot of smoking everywhere, right? So you're always going to have that bit of a reactionary thing where people are like, I want to maintain my lifestyle for the rest of my life.
right.
And in my head, that kicks in when they're about 50.
Damn 50-year-olds. That explains why Rollo's such a misogynist. And some stuff's going to work, though, but some stuff isn't. Like, we always have the survivorship bias. You'll remember the smoking ban, but there's probably a whole bunch of shit. Like, Crystal Clear Pepsi was in the 80s. That didn't take off at all. So the guys that got mad and just wanted normal Pepsi back, they won in that one. And I know that's a bad example, but you get the point, right?
Yeah, like if we're weighing the smoking ban versus Crystal Pepsi, I think I agree with smoking bans and getting rid of Crystal Pepsi.
Finally, something we can agree on. Yeah, I just find at
Point
this point,
being-
you're right. We have enough information that you're able to make better choices. You're able to get ahead of the curve on the smoking ban, but still push back on Crystal Pepsi, you know? Like, we kind
that
of
was
have no
kinda like
excuses as long as you have your eyes open.
And kind of to go full circle on it, it's Crystal Pepsi made sense from a rational perspective, right?
Actually, I don't
People
even know if
like
it did.
Pepsi.
What was the...
I have no idea, but like if you go from like if you Crystal Pepsi in theory made sense, right?
Right.
In practice, it didn't. The smoking ban made sense in both theory and practice. So that thing survived. And I think what you're going to see now is that changes are happening faster and faster. Like, you had the Luddites back during the Industrial Revolution. I'm sure you had an equivalent during the Agricultural Revolution who just wanted to keep hunting and fishing and didn't want to do grains and shit. And they died off. So in the end, like, people who are anti-change will die off because I think the dominant paradigm of the universe is survival by natural selection.
Yeah, better systems work over the longer term. They outbreed the bad systems or the non-adaptable systems.
Yeah, and to do my customary, like, Austrian painter reference, yeah, Hitler was a vegan, he was anti-smoking, and he was a teetotaler. So that should tell you all you need to know.
I heard he wore sweaters. So if you're wearing sweaters, you could too be an Austrian painter.
Maybe.
Yeah, I always
And
love
it,
that,
like-
where everything Hitler did was bad. Well, Hitler had a sandwich on Tuesdays. You better not. You don't want to be Hitler, do you? I guess not.
He drank tea.
Yeah. He
Fuck the
made
British.
a car. He and Henry Ford, both the same. Same man. Two sides of
But
the same
generally-
coin.
And I tend to think, like, the people who do well over time and generational wealth and all that, it just comes down to they're right 51% of their time, the time when it comes to anticipating what changes are coming next. Because that was like one of those things that kind of struck me because I like being always right. Was that when like a
Really?
guy,
That's you?
a buddy of mine who's a very high level stock analyst says that, on average, if you're right 51% of the time consistently, you're the best stock analyst in the world.
Well, so I got to do a quick Austrian painter joke.
That's fine.
Anyways, keep going. I'm listening.
All right, I want to see your Austrian painter joke.
Oh, it was just him
being
saying
that-
the VW bug had no legroom. I'm like, neither did Dachau. Actually, I think that's
No.
pretty tasteless. Never mind.
Well, based on the overpopulation when it was liberated, no, it didn't.
It's got lots of legroom now.
Anyway, point being that everything is always going to change. Like, no generation have been able to have a certain level. Like, I think the boomers are probably the ones that had the most degree of stability. If you look away from, like, the Vietnam War and the crash in 80, they were essentially, from the day they were born until, like, their 50s and 60s, they just had a constant growth all that time.
Yeah. So like that makes sense. They were kids on the uphill climb of like prosperity, and they aged out of the market at the peak just before things started to go down, or like before it got down too far. I agree. Yeah. They got very, very lucky, and not just that, they were the largest demographic. So even if things weren't perfect, they had enough numbers to be able to swing things in their direction, and that's why. Like, it wasn't just, teenagers get old enough, they want to have sex in their 20s. That's what it normally is. But for the boomers, it was the summer of love. Or it wasn't like when you turn 30 or 40, you want to start a family, you want to start getting better in your career. But no, it had to be 80s greed. There was like giant movements surrounding it just because you have way too many people doing it all at the same time, creating these demographic bottlenecks.
And that's why I think it's interesting when I saw that article, like, do we need to, like, it was about AOC, like, do we need to elect more millennials to Congress? And it's like, yeah, you kind of do because you're running out of boomers. They're dying off.
And there's not enough Gen X's to fill all the ranks.
Yeah. But I think that's going to be the interesting one. I've talked about that before. Are we going to just leave? Is, like, Gen X going to be our Prince Charles? Or are we just going to jump over him?
Oh, for sure we are. But Gen X has known that for their entire life, though. They knew they were going to be the ones forgotten about. As soon as
because
Generation Y, that they used to call us, was like outbreeding the shit out of them.
Because like millennials and Gen Z are a bigger demographic, and I think the most interesting thing there is going to be that I would argue that in the U.S. at least, you've had Democrats and Republicans are two sides of the same coin. Both have roughly the same economic policy, but different social policies.
Yeah.
In Europe, the left and the right have had quite similar economic policies, but different social policies.
Canada too, same thing. Generally the same, slightly different social policies, but that was mostly because of the industries that each one kind of got behind. It was always just different flavors of the same policies, I found.
Because at least what I've seen, like, I think that's the major difference between Europe and the US, is that in Europe it's always been about capitalists and socialists. Mm-hmm. That's been the major battleground. Do you want like a socialist government so you get more welfare state, more public services? Do you want a capitalist once you get slightly less public services, slightly lower taxes? In the US, it's been, do you want gay people to get married or not? Do you want people to be able to have abortions? Do you want to legalize weed? Those have been the major differences because both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, have been corporate parties.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, corporate's going to win. Let's dangle these keys in front of you guys so you can pick, do you want the shiny red keys or the shiny blue keys? And all the kids point at them and go, ooh.
So that was kind of like my take on it. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see economics become a much more important part of American politics and a differentiation between the Democrats and Republicans. And in Europe, you're going to see social policy become more of a differentiator between the right and the left.
So I guess that's the question. So if you're doing well for yourself, obviously you want to move away from the socialist places and into the capitalist ones. And if you're having a hard go of it, you're probably better off moving to the socialist places, which is basically going to turn into, on one side, you're going to get Brazilian economics with favelas and mansions. and on the other side you're going to get like a bogged down socialist state that's going to go full commie. I don't think either one's going to work out well. But I mean, I'll be dead by then, so I don't give a fuck. Just go to where you're treated best. That's what the Mexicans are doing in the States right now. They're going to go to Arizona and get some free healthcare.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense because, because if you start to think about it, a lot of things are modern. Like borders are fairly modern inventions.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have tribal areas, but you didn't have borders in the same sense.
No, that came out of, I think, was it like around the World Wars when empires finally started turning into nation states?
Yeah, and I've actually had a lot of fun with that because some dude with way too much fucking time on his hands sat down and he made like an animation of the borders in Europe since like year 0 until today.
Ooh.
And it's fucking hilarious because you see the borders are moving constantly until about 1950 and fuck all has moved since.
Yeah, Yugoslavia split up. And Greece
and
lost
I think that's
5
kind
feet.
And I think that's kind of like, I think to be a little reductionist, I think you have two kind of people. You have the people who are like, fuck the present, let's try something new and have some fun. Mm-hmm. Versus the people who are like, fuck the present, let's just keep doing what we've always been doing, that's worked fine. So, and that's like Nietzsche's Apollyon versus Denossian perspectives.
Ooh, I've never even heard of that one. I guess I have to read more Nietzsche.
Well, just read Birthplace of Tragedy. That's enough Nietzsche for you. But,
yes, it is. It absolutely is.
I just think like one of the major positives and negatives at the same time with Nietzsche is he's a philosopher that's extremely fun and entertaining to read as a layman. Mm-hmm. But it's also a philosopher that you have to have read a fuck ton of philosophy prior to Nietzsche in order to understand Nietzsche's perspective.
Oh, so he's like the Rich Cooper of philosophy.
I think that's kind of insulting.
His book is good, by the way. I'm not shitting on his book. I'm just saying his book is full of jargon. So if you don't know the Manosphere, the book may seem confusing to a newer reader.
Yeah, and anyway, like the whole thing with the Dionysian versus Apollonian is the Apollonians were rule-based, deontological, very organized society. Mm-hmm. The Dionysian perspective want to drink and fucking party. And I think those two perspectives are present in all of us. I just tend to think that some of us lean more Dionysian, some of us lean more Apollonian. And I think the trads are leaning more towards maintaining order, keep things working, whereas the Dionysian side are like, fuck this, let's have some fun. Let's just throw a Molotov cocktail in this machinery and let's see what happens.
Something that happens anyway.
And I will admit, like, I lean firmly towards the Dionysian side of things if people didn't get that. I just tend to think that, yeah, you can learn from the past, but when changes are happening as rapidly as they are now, things like 5-year plans are not very useful.
I'm begrudgingly on your side, if that makes sense. Like, I would love the stability thing. A stable rule set is awesome, something you can thrive within. But I've kind of just come to accept that that's not, like, things are moving way too fast for that to happen. And so either get with the program or get left behind. And I really do not want to get left behind.
Hey, dude, we have a bunch of men with an average age of 70 trying to regulate Facebook.
Good luck to that, sir. That's what they always do, though. They try to regulate it, but then Facebook is smart. They'll just come up with something different.
Yeah, that
like,
was my...
Did you see the one, by the way, on Facebook where they had Candace Owens or whatever was trying to sue Facebook because their fact-checking division called her a hoax? And she's like, that's slander. But then they made the argument that our fact-checking division isn't actually an objective fact-checking division. And the courts were like, yeah, technically, it's like organic food. The word is meaningless, no matter how much it sounds like it has meaning. So they're right. They're not a fact-checking organization because that doesn't exist. Like, that's some clever shit. That's what you're going up against for all the guys who want order. Just word games. Yeah.
Like, I had that debate with a guy because we were discussing tax policy, which is one of my major, like... things I enjoy talking about. It's one of my things. It's not all of my thing, but... and the point is, like, you can put down your smartest professors, your top tax bureaucrats, your top politicians in the tax area. You can have them work uninterrupted for 5 years, making an ironclad tax policy, and my lawyer will find a loophole in that in about 10 minutes if I pay him 50 grand.
Right.
And it's just like the smartest people are just never going to be in government.
Well, it's until government becomes the most lucrative place to be, but at that point you've got a tin pot dictatorship. So I don't think you want them in there either.
No, at that point you got essentially communism, right?
Yeah, working, or even just whatever Russia's got right now, like working for Putin or working for the mob is probably the two best Russian jobs to have.
Yeah, probably. And probably less chance of dying if you're working for the mob, I'm guessing.
Yeah, as long as you fly straight, follow that order, follow the rules, get the right tattoos. All right, so we're running on 45 seconds till the end here, so we're going to end this one off. I don't have any final thoughts on this one, other than it's all a confusing mess. Everything is contradictory, but if you use the right tool at the right time, you can probably succeed, and you're better off trying to adapt than you are trying to fight adapting. That's kind of my take.
I agree with you, and my advice would be like, just try everything, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, discard it. If it does, keep doing it.
Yeah. That includes this place. I did put out a tweet yesterday with you guys where some guy was like, I've been watching you guys for a year. I think I get your shtick now. I'm like, this is that moment when you realize you've been around too long and you haven't fucked off yet. As much as I love your guys' support in that, if you've already got what you need, like, you don't need to be here anymore. All right, I'm going to end this so Carl and I can chat. Johnny's Rule Zero, I think it's going to be like all audience participation call-in shows, so it's going to be a bit of a gong show. Gendernomics 1 and 2 is in the chat or in the description. Get a copy if you haven't. If you like hearing Carl rant, you should see him write. It's way better.